Later this morning, Michael Williams will be in Texarkana. He'll be at the Silver Spoon just off of Moore's Lane at 9:30 this morning. Then later he'll be in Atlanta, Texas at 11:30, and he's traveling through the great state of Texas. Michael Williams, good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Jeff, good morning. Good to be with you.
I tell you what, man, you're you come highly recommended, I must say. A lot of my friends, and we have quite a few mutual friends. A lot of folks are very excited about you, about your candidacy, and what you could possibly bring to our nation, and really do a great job for the people of the Lone Star State. First of all, let's talk about where you come from and where you're headed, because I know you're going to be running for U.S. Senate.
Well, I'm originally, if you're looking in terms of birth, I'm originally from West Texas, born out in Midland. But I've had the opportunity to serve Texas for the last 12 years, elected statewide 3 times as a member of the Railroad Commission of Texas. And I've had, obviously, a great opportunity during that course of time to serve the people. And to serve in a way and to govern in a way that I think conservatives expect of their leaders. You know, I've served over in agencies where I actually cut the size of government, passed up $250,000 worth of a pay raise, and decided to resign my position in order to be able to focus full-time on earning the support of Texans for this great seat.
So many people talk about your speaking ability, how you're able to walk into a room and absolutely energize a crowd. Where does that come from? Does it come from a deep conviction of conservative principles? Does it come from a love of country and love of state? Where does that come from?
Well, I think originally, the gifting is one that came from God. But I think what people are hearing, obviously, is indeed a conviction that says that we are in the middle of a battle in order to regain a sense of personal liberty and personal responsibility. That is the core of what this country was founded on, and that is an ingredient that is extremely important for the future of America. But I think there's sort of 2 pieces to that. Obviously, the ability to speak and to be an orator, that is a God-given talent. I had nothing to do with that. That is a gifting that came from God, and it's my responsibility to share it with others.
When you look at this run for the U.S. Senate, what entered into your thinking, and what exactly is it that made you want to do this?
Jeff, you look at what has happened in the last 2 years with the election of President Obama, and I sometimes say jokingly, but I do mean it seriously, is that we heard him say that he was for hope and change. And quite frankly, most Texans just want him to change. But the other thing was, you see central in the way that he is governed. He said that, that yes, you can. But what they really meant was no, you can't. But the government will do it for you. You see it in Obamacare. You see it in the efforts to sort of take away our ability to defend ourselves and our Second Amendment rights. You see it with the foolishness with global warming. All of that combined said that he is moving us in a direction, as I say constantly, toward this slouch toward European-style socialism, and we have got to get this country turned in a different direction.
When you look at the U.S. Senate and compared to the House is obviously more conservative. It kind of mirrors what happens in the state of Texas, the House being conservative, the Senate being a little more moderate. In D.C., when you take a look at the U.S. Senate, what would Michael Williams be like in the U.S. Senate? Would he be part of the change that is definitely needed there?
Senator Jim DeMint, who many people think is probably one of the most conservative of the United States Senate and a Tea Party favorite, when he endorsed me for this race about a year plus ago, he said that I could be a game changer in Washington. Said that I was the kind of conservative that could come to Washington and actually change the game. He also said I had the kind of courage to stand up to the elite. So I would like to think that I can indeed be the kind of game changer that Senator DeMint said that I could be, and the kind of reinforcements that he needs in Washington.
When you take a look at the timeline that we're on right now, how important would it be for Michael Williams to be in the U.S. Senate if the current president is reelected?
Well, I think it's important whether he's reelected or not, and it's my hope, and I'm sure it's the hope of many of your listeners, that he's not reelected in 2012 and he won't be there when I get there in 2013.
Amen.
But assuming that he is, just for the sake of this conversation, but assuming that he is, we need someone that can go toe-to-toe with the president, and go toe-to-toe with the president and rally Americans around the next generation of conservative solutions and ideas. And I believe I've been prepared for this very, very moment to go toe-to-toe with that president.
You know, people say that freshmen in the U.S. Senate are seen and not heard. Are you willing to are you willing to buck that?
I don't think anybody's ever said that I was seen and not heard. So I don't think that's going to change in the future.
That's good. I like that because, you know, I mean, it's these certain unspoken protocols that I think have gotten us into a lot of trouble. You know, there's a lot of folks that will get into office and then they'll get, and a good friend of ours, Louis Gohmert, has said this before, Congressman Gohmert, that, you know, people can get co-opted in these kind of situations.
Right.
How do you, going into, you know, if you are elected to this office, how do you prevent that? How do you prevent being co-opted by the big boys?
You know, if you don't know who you are before you go to Washington, then that could very well happen. I've been blessed. I think in 57 years I've had an opportunity to come to a real understanding of whose I am and who I am. But I've also had the experience of being in Washington. I went to Washington as part of the Reagan Revolution. I was a young foot soldier for Ronald Reagan back in 1984. I stayed through and worked for President George H.W. Bush. I've gone through certain battles of my own. You know, back in 1990 as an assistant secretary at the U.S. Department of Education, I was the person that directed colleges and universities to discontinue race-based affirmative action. I caught the heat from the Washington Post and the New York Times. And I'd like to say, and I think the record says, that I stood firm. So I've gone through these battles. I'm battle-tested. And so I think that the way that I can do it going forward is the way I did it when I was much younger.
Now, coming up this morning at 9:30, you're at the Silver Spoon in Texarkana. Any particular idea what you'll be talking about when you come to town?
Well, obviously, we're going to talk about personal liberty and the challenges that we're faced now from this administration and the president's cohorts in the Congress. We obviously have to talk about spending and how we create jobs in this country. We'll talk a little bit about immigration, of course, and energy policy, and anything that the people who attend want to visit with me about. We'll have a conversation about that as well.
Excellent. You'll be in Texarkana at 9:30. You'll be in Atlanta, Texas at 11:30 very quickly. How can folks find out more about Michael Williams?
Go to our webpage. It's williams4texas.com, or check us out on Facebook or Twitter, Michael Williams.
Excellent.